My name is Dr. Chris Jenkins, and I am the CEO of the Oriane Society and the host of the Snake Talk podcast, the podcast where you learn about nature's most feared, maligned, and persecuted animals. I invite you to listen to this conversation, and maybe you'll find that what you perceive as fear is actually rooted in a deep fascination. Welcome to the Snake Talk podcast. We have a good one today. We are going to talk about one of my favorite animals on the planet in a region that I've never been to, but it is one that's always fascinated me. And specifically, we're going to talk about the Chocoan Bushmaster in Ecuador and more broadly in the region as well. And I also am talking to a person who I've really kind of known for a while now. And she's just an amazing person. So I'm glad to be able to introduce her to all of you. So María Elena, welcome to the podcast. Happy to have you here today.
Thank you, Chris, for this opportunity. Really nice to be here talking with you about my job.
Great. Well, I like to start off all of my episodes and let the audience get to know our guests a little bit better. And I always like to start at the very beginning. So, while a lot of us are really into snakes and it makes a lot of sense to us, there's a lot of people in the world who don't understand our interest or our fascination with snakes. And so I like to learn where that came from. So where was it? Like, how did you get into snakes? Is it something that happened when you were a young child or something that happened later in your career? How did that all come about?
Okay, first of all, Chris, and to the audience following this amazing episode, my family background is that my mom comes from the coastal region in Ecuador, full of a lot of biodiversity, and my dad comes from the mountain region. So most part of our vacations and holidays were the destination was the beaches in Ecuador and mountains. And for some reasons, my family, most part of the time, encouraged us, myself and my brother and sister, to do outdoor activities, climbing mountains, going to the river, swimming in the sea. So I think that was part of the first interactions that we as a child had with nature, and we start enjoying nature. I need to be honest and tell you that snakes were not in my mind as an objective to become an herpetologist. I think everything works in a way how I was exposed to millions of activities and millions of interactions with animals, and I was having something in my hard disk, which was a movie, and that movie was showing an amazing king cobra, and I remembered that king cobra on the screen, and I was just amazed of that animal, and that was in my hard disk for many years. And I was keep saying all of my entire childhood that I would like to become someone to work with wild animals. That is something I was having in my mind for many years until I decided to study biology. When I was 17 years old, I started studying biology at the university. And then by coincidence, I started volunteering at the Vertebrate Museum where, because I didn't have too much knowledge about anything, I was in the second semester. My duties were to change the alcohol in the jars in snakes. And I was doing that daily. And deeply in my mind, I was thinking, wouldn't it be interesting to work with these animals, but live ones? By coincidence, many months later, a Quito Vivarium, it was opening the doors. It was the first live reptile and amphibian collection in Quito, created by a French herpetologist, and he gave me the opportunity to start working with the animals he was having in the collection. But it was a coincidence that when I went the first day to that collection, I saw a king cobra that he had in captivity, and that was love at first sight. So I just was a coincidence that I had in my mind the image of the king cobra, and I went to that place and find out the king cobra, and I fall in love of the animals, and then I was involved in the management and captive management of reptiles, and snakes were my favorites, of course.
Yeah. Well, that's great. So you had this, this experience when you're young, seeing this king cobra, on a movie or video, and then, you were able to see the real thing, and kind of all came together. So did you end up going to school, like a university or something like that, to study biology, or did you go straight into working at the vivarium?
Well, I was dealing and managing both. I got my degree, my bachelor degree as a biologist, general biologist, where you learn all of the topics by botany, zoology, mathematics, physics, blah, blah, blah. But I was just starting. So when I started working at the vivarium, I was just combining my time of studies and my duties at the reptile collection. It was hard. I don't know how I did it, but I finished my studies after 5 years of study, having some gaps because in some situations I had the opportunity to get some international courses. I was part of the training course at Jersey Wildlife Preservation Trust, where I was working at the reptile house at Jersey Zoo. Wow, that was one
Wow.
of
Yeah.
the wow moments I had in my life. And every time my boss was encouraging me to learn from that international and those experiences and come back to Ecuador, because for my reality as a woman 35 years ago in the 80s, telling people, friends and colleagues that I'm going to study and work with snakes, well, is a kind until now like, what? Why you're not working with children or old people? Why you're working with evil animals? So it's not a common job. As you said at the beginning, probably in the States, in Europe, the community of herpetologists is huge. Here in Ecuador, we are fewer pathologists, people working in this field, and that makes things that are more challenging in many aspects.
Mhm. Huh. That's great. So you went to the university while working at the vivarium, and then you've continued to work at the vivarium ever since, right?
Yes, and again, the progress and how I was learning more and more give me the opportunity to get more challenges. At the beginning, I was the keeper because my boss was the director of the organization working with projects. But I was learning. He was putting me challenges like, okay, you need to be involved in field trips. Okay. And then I was managing projects. But I really love the captive management, how we can learn from the captive management of reptiles, specifically in species for which there is no too much data about natural behavior, natural history, or reproductive behavior. There is nothing written and studied in neotropical areas, but also the chance to be facing challenges at the professional level when at some point I get my bachelor degree in 2000 and in 2004, and then because of my challenges and my activities were demanding from myself a better skills, I need to apply for a master's degree in 2010. I had the opportunity to go to Australia to do a master's degree on environment and education for sustainability, which was the perfect combination to understand how in this particular group of animals, venomous snakes, we need to combine some other aspects more than biology and the ecology point of view. We need to understand that at Latin American level, the impact of venomous snakes in communities is important. And we cannot go with the discourse of save this snake because it's an interesting, important, or amazing animal. That is not the priority for communities. So I understood, having that chance to open my mind and working with indigenous people in Australia as well as I was working before in indigenous people in Ecuador, how we need to have another tools, another approaches, not only the biological ones, to be able to carry out conservation programs in this group of animals.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, well, that's amazing. So let's talk a little bit about the vivarium itself. I had the opportunity to visit a number of years ago now, but really amazing place. And so, you said you started as a keeper, and then you've been going through, and you got your master's degree, your bachelor's, and now your master's, and the master's kind of brought in that human side, which is really important with venomous snakes if we're interested in conserving them. Just because they're such a hated group of animals, unfortunately. So understanding that and how to work with people is just really important. But so, what's your current position at the vivarium?
Right now, I'm the executive director of the NGO, which part of my duties are to design and develop strategies in terms of develop projects, involve other young professionals in some other areas of the herpetology, like proposing studies in some areas that we consider are priority because there is no information. We develop educational programs for schools, not only for the Quito schools, but all of the areas in the rural and urban areas. We also are in a close relationship with the community at the political level, because there is a very important number of reptiles and amphibians in the city. I'm living here in Quito. Quito is one of the most biodiverse cities in terms of reptiles. So we need to encourage the public to understand what is the role of those reptiles. So we are part of a community to help the declaration of some areas of parks, national parks, how urban parks can be the places for the last remnants for reptiles in Quito. So we have an important role in the decision making at the level of environmental decisions in the city, at the level of wildlife fauna, with other groups of colleagues in mammals and birds. So this is part of my duties. However, we are right now facing a very, how can I say, a very negative impact of a trend that is not understanding the value of captive collections. In this particular case, having captive animals for conservation, having captive animals for educational purposes. We are facing that trend, that community is not understanding what is the role of captive collections. And talking about the vivarium, Chris, I need to tell you that the Quito Vivarium, is the iconic project of the NGO Fundación Herpetológica Gustavo Cés. It was created in 1989, and one of the objectives by which this reptile zoo was created was specifically to educate the community about talking about aspects about reptiles and amphibians. If we doesn't exist, we are very proud to tell you that 80% of people right now involved in herpetology in Ecuador passed in the vivarium as a volunteer when they were students at early stages in their careers. And then there is people that right now are working at the academia or in some other NGOs or in other parts of the country. So we consider that this role of involvement of students in the 30 years ago is one of the main roles that the Quito Vivarium is still having at the moment. Plus, offering a very nice visit in Quito of a nice exhibition of reptiles. Of course, that because of after the pandemic and because we were closed for 10 months, now we are recovering some of the activities that we just left pending because we sent some of the staff home. We had other priorities. The community was just in lockdown, so we were unable to come to the vivarium daily to open the facilities because we couldn't. But we still go, we keep going, and we are more and more convinced that the main ideas of the creation of this exhibition is worth it. Is the community is still following us. We have a Facebook page, we have a web page where people can connect and see the very huge variety of activities that we are carrying out with the focus to educate the people about reptiles and amphibians.
Yeah, it's great. It sounds like there's a lot of things going on there at the vivarium, from in person kind of education, both at the vivarium and beyond, as well as working on the policy side, as you mentioned, and working on research and with partners and colleagues. So sounds like there's a lot going on. So if people were to go visit the vivarium, what is that experience like? Just like if somebody's in Quito for the day and they're going to come visit and spend some time there, what is that experience like for people?
Okay, our main target are families, mom, dad, children. That has, first of all, I have to confess that our trick is to encourage children to understand more about reptiles, and that is easy for us. And those children that are in love with reptiles, they bring their families to see the facilities. And that is why our educational program and outreach activities are focused mainly for children, because these are the public that can understand in a better way without too much stress, without too much thinkings and negative beliefs about snakes specifically. It's easier to educate and work with children. And that experience for families is to explore first of all that Ecuador is within in the top 14 most biodiverse countries in terms of reptiles in the world. They don't know that. The main impact, and people is shocked to know that Quito city, we have at least 16 species of snakes living. Just if you walk from the Quito, the city where the buildings and houses are, you just go 30 minutes driving. There are places where you can encounter snakes, lizards, frogs. So people don't know that. They didn't know before coming to the vivarium. So the shock in a positive way that they is like, oh, really? I didn't know that. And more they understand, they start understanding the role, the ecological role of these species in our ecosystem, how frogs can eat flies, and how amphibians can be our the animals that are helping us to, for example, prevent diseases like dengue, like malaria, how snakes eating rats and eating rodents can be our friends to help us to have a better environment. That for people living in urban big cities is not an experience that they are having always, and they don't have the chance every day. So the experience for them is just amazing, is a wow experience. Of course that we are very cautious to not impact in a negative way, because not always all of the audiences we can interact with live animals. That is something that people ask, but just in a way to come, visit, touch the snake, and go. This is not that way, You need to touch and understand how the audience, if the audience is ready or not. You need to think about that places like Ecuador with a high amount of snake species. We are almost 300 species of snakes in Ecuador. The negative impact that snakes have in the common knowledge of an Ecuadorian is terrible, because we face terrible impact of snake bites in the coastal and Amazon region, and people always put that thing together. Snakes plus bite equal death. So that is the rule, and it is not easy always to talk with audiences handling snakes. So we are very careful and we are very professional to manage this in a way to not be producing the opposite effect, which is educate,
Yeah. So if people come, though, they will see you have snakes in cages displayed, so they'll be able to come and see a lot of different snake species, I'm assuming. But another question is, what types of reptiles and amphibians do you have at the vivarium? Are they all Ecuador species? Are they global, South American? What's kind of your live animal collection? What is it made up of?
Our main focus, Chris, is to educate about local species. We have our institutional objectives are to keep animals from the Ecuadorian that we can find in Ecuador. Some of them, how we get the animals, we have a permission that it's provided to our institution under a patente every year that allowed our institution to have live animals in captivity. We need to ask for another patente every year, providing information how our collection increased or not, and that is how we are probably the few institutions in Ecuador allowed to have animals in captivity. The species that we have are under a collection plan, that are the most common reptiles and amphibians found in Ecuador, the most common reptiles and amphibians possibly inside illegal trade, to educate people why and how animals from this group are right now, always, but now more than ever, under illegal trade targets. How we can educate children to avoid buying, because by law in Ecuador, any private person is allowed to have reptiles or wildlife fauna in captivity. So we need and keep a close discourse telling that, unfortunately, more and more now some animals from overseas is coming and are sold in pet shops as pets. However, that's illegal, and we need to educate our community about that animals. And one particular exception in the collection is specifically talking about the Mexican ajolot, the ambistomas, that we are having in Ecuador, selling in some pet shops as pets. We decide as institution to have an exhibition of this animal to educate children in a way that they need to understand that this is not from Ecuador. What would be the ecological impact of releasing ajolotes in the environment, just to let new generation understand we are not preventing people to love reptiles. However, you need to be responsible enough to understand what if you have an ajolote or some other animals from overseas in captivity, and you one day decide to release in a lake in Ecuador. That would be a terrible ecological impact. So our education is around these aspects during your visit, during your collection, your experience at the vivarium. But also, the public has the opportunity to see and be involved and understand a little bit more how are the efforts to carry out conservation programs, because we are developing like 5 conservation programs in 5 different species that are locally found in Quito. One covers aspects about the false coral, Lampropeltis microfolis, that is found in the surrounding areas of Quito. People don't know that people confuse that false coral with the true coral, and of course, automatically they kill them. There is another project that we are carrying out in Quito and surroundings about a marsupial frog. We are the first institution in Ecuador that release born in captivity and release in nature marsupial frog species Gastroteca riobambe in an area that we rehabilitate the forest, and we are following the animals, how they are well adapted to the ecosystem, because you know that amphibians are carriers, and in some situations they develop the chytrid disease, which is a very negative impact in amphibian population. So we are measuring and following that. We also have some other projects, not in Quito, but in the Amazon, in some areas where we work with indigenous communities, identifying the impact that some venomous snakes are causing in their health. But we are covering the aspects, how the fact that the women is dedicated to some particular roles in the community, like collecting food or harvesting the crops. Some of the impacts are in the hands and arms. In contrast to this, the impact in men, for example, in some indigenous communities is different. Is in legs, because they go to the forest to hunt or to their duties. So it's different, and the aspects and the psychological health and some activities that we are carrying out to involve that women in activities related to snakes need to be done considering those aspects, or involving this community, these women and men, in their duties again after a snake bite impact. So we are developing that on the Amazon, and also in the coastal region. We are carrying out outreach and education in terms to prevention of snake bites, especially before the wet season starts in the country, which automatically is going to increase the encountering human snakes. And we are developing that as part of our educational program, but also as the way to start getting in contact with communities in order to identify the potential areas where we can, after, develop a conservation program about a specific species in that area. So this is more or less a summary of the activities that we are carrying out in terms of telling people when they visit our facilities, they can learn about this as well.
Yeah, that's great. Sounds like you have a lot going on, and you're really doing incredible things for Ecuador and beyond. So, snakes are one of the most persecuted groups of animals in the world, but we are dedicated to changing that. If you like what we've been discussing here on the Snake Talk podcast, here's an opportunity to turn that inspiration into action. Head over to www.orian.org and explore how you can support the Orian Society. Click on Take Action on our menu to make a difference. Let's transition a little bit and talk specifically about kind of on-the-ground conservation projects that you're working on. And I want to talk about this Chocoan Bushmaster project, but I want to build up to it first. So the first thing I want to talk about is kind of the region that this animal lives in. And maybe you can kind of just give us an overview of the Choco and kind of where you find it in Ecuador and beyond, and what type of ecosystem it is, and any kind of interesting things about biodiversity, endemism, anything like that makes that region special.
Okay. First of all, Ecuador is just one of the smallest countries in South America. Despite of that, we are one of the most biodiverse countries in terms of reptiles. And in contrast to this, biodiversity and an amazing amount of microhabitats and ecosystems that are the answer why we have that big biodiversity, is also that Ecuador is facing an important deforestation in some areas. And the Chocoan region in Ecuador, which is the western north part of the country, which is a continuation to Colombia, to the, again, western area, Pacific area in Colombia, but also the Chocoan region also reaches the eastern part of Panama coming down, which is an amazing area and region where is the last part where the Chocoan Bushmaster Lachesis acrocorda lives. So depending on the point of view that you analyze, the ecosystem for that snake in Ecuador is shrinking because all of the lodging, all of the mining companies are already there. The presence of mining companies in the Chocoan area are important, and some private reserves are already there in order to preserve the last bit of Chocoan region that probably for Colombians is still a hotspot of biodiversity, yes, but the reality of Colombia is different because there is not too much mining in the Chocoan region in Colombia and no too much impact of deforestation like in Ecuador. However, in Panama can be similar to the impact of deforestation and anthropocentric human interventions in Panama, because that is the area that right now, and that is also another of the reasons why our research need to be done, is also in terms of security and migration. That is the path by which most of migrants from South America reach the way to go to Central America through this area in Panama. That is the area and the region where this snake coexist. So as you can understand, all of the factors that this snake is facing not only is because that the ecosystem is starting to be smaller, but also people is changing their forest into crop sites. They are becoming this is not viable to keep a forest because of the costs. People need to survive, so they are easily transformed into a cropping area or cattle for cattle, and that's it. So all of the reserves located in that area are private again, and that is why I am working in that area in private reserves, where shows that the state of the forest is primary, is still primary.
Yeah.
However,
So the forest there, it's on the Pacific, and so I mean it really is like a dense, independent of the development, but just like kind of the natural ecosystem. It's really kind of a dense rainforest
it
jungle. I'm
is,
assuming where rain falls as it's going up on the west side of the Andes.
and it's very hilly, and the landscape it's just very, in some situations, is inaccessible. And that is how carrying out projects there, first of all, there is no biologist available to go and live there for many months because the conditions are very strong, wet, rainy season, and mud. Secondly, the security issues, unfortunately, there is a place that right now it's surrounded by all of these situation about the impact of the drug dealers. That is the path by which
Mm-hmm.
some organizations, illegal organizations, are there, unfortunately. So It's not easy to work there as a researcher either. However, we take precautions in terms to go, do not stop in some areas that we consider are dangerous, and we go straight away to the reserve. And when you arrive to the reserve, it's just peaceful and nice. So the state of the forest in those reserves are as their natural state. However, and why I decide to take and lead this project, Chris, is that in my job going to communities and educating people, that was something interesting, that people really know which is the Bushmaster and which is not the Bushmaster, which is the Fertilans. They know each other. They know exactly where they live. They know exactly how they behave. However, in some 2 years ago, I start listening from the audiences. Yes, we found the Bushmaster next to the cattle area, or I found Bushmasters in my laundry in my house, and that was something I was like, to be honest, doubting at the beginning, that those
Mm-hmm.
people were telling me that the Bushmaster is like in the backyard part of the house. It was like
Yeah.
no way.
Maybe a
So I
fertilance,
went
but not a
there.
bushmaster.
No, but to be honest, how the pressure from other parts of the Choco is doing is that pressing the Bushmaster to start going to secondary forest because the primary forest is not enough. And that is why I decided to take the lead in this project, because I need to understand what is going on with the Bushmaster, how they can change living in a primary forest into secondary forest. And that is why I start desperating to present the proposal to authorities, get permission, because all of this need to be done with permissions, and you can understand all of the paper, all of the bureaucracy I need. I was planning these things 2018. Remember that you came to Ecuador in 2017, and since then we
Mm-hmm.
were already thinking about that. But anyway, from 2018, I start writing the project, sending to authorities. They were rejecting, this is not here, why you are doing this, are you a specialist, who's going to do that, blah blah blah. So I finally start in 2023, where my plan is to put, for the first 18 months, five radio transmitter in five specimens. I only have one at the moment. I put, it is a female that was uh, found with a community, and they were going to kill the snake. And I said, please do not. I stopped them to kill it. I took 2 days to reach the area and took the animal into captivity for 5 years. And that was a female kept in captivity for 5 years, and the animal increased the size amazingly. She's a female of 1 meter and
Mm-hmm.
70 centimeters. So I was keeping her in captivity. And when I went to the reserve to find out uh, Bushmasters, wild Bushmasters, there were zero wild Bushmasters, because it was an amazing dry season. No one uh, never expect that dry season, so no way to find out um, wild animals. So I take the decision to do a translocation, to use that wild animal that was in good condition, good shape, big female, to translocate to that reserve. And I did that. I took the female. We did all of the procedure with Dr. Dale DeNardo from Arizona State University. He kindly accepted to come down and do the procedure in wild, in the reserve. And we put the radio transmitter, but also a data logger to obtain for 2 years data about body temperature of this female. And we release her in the reserve, and we are tracking her, and we know already the movement. It's more or less about 1 to 2 hectares, the normal territorial place, and she prefers some particular type of habitat. And right now, I went last week, and we found that the female is in the same hole for almost 2 weeks, but now she's sharing the hole with another specimen that we have fingers crossed that is a male, because April and May are the season or the months where most of the snakes are in mating season and reproducing. So that are the last updates I would like to tell you about this. It's not easy. You can even imagine all of the equipment, first of all, is imported or donated from friends, is not found in Ecuador, and I need to ask to bring to friends to bring it, because if I import into the courier and things, it's going to be a mess, and I don't like that. So I have two antennas, the radio transmitters from the ATS company. They are working perfectly, and some friends are very much interested to help and understand and just motivate other researchers to collaborate and follow our the data that we are collecting, which is amazing.
Yeah.
Yes.
Well, I want to back up a little bit and just talk about this Bushmaster species in general. So tell it, first of all, I mean, just describe it to us. I mean, Bushmasters look fairly similar across the species, but like how big do these animals get? You know, what are their color markings? Just what does this animal look like?
Okay. The Bushmaster, Chris, in my view, is one of the no is one is the biggest viper in the neotropics, reaching the data reported of the biggest bushmaster. It was many years ago of about 3.46 or 3.56 centimeters. But actually, I have in an animal that I kept here in captivity, and I measured it, and it was 3.9 3.90 centimeters, 0.90, which is the biggest female, is a female that I had in captivity and unfortunately died. This is the biggest viper. Second, the fact that she lives in that Chocoan region is the only place, is endemic to the Chocoa, talking about the Western Pacific in Panama, Colombia, Ecuador. You know that there are some other three species, which is Lachesis muta, well distributed on the Amazon side of the continent, South American continent. And there are other two species in Central America, the Pacific one and the Caribbean one, the Lachesis stenophris and Lachesis melanocephala. However, and given that some data about behavior, it is collected already in Lachesis muta on the Amazon and also on the Central American species. But talking about Lachesis acrocorda, there is just none information, just one paper about reproduction in captivity done in Colombia and Antioquia University. And that's it. We don't know about the ecology. We don't know about, well, assuming that it's the same genus compared to Lachesis muta on the Amazon and the two other species in Central America, yes, they share this territorial behavior, this the fact that there is the only viper laying eggs, which means that it under an evolutionary reason for that could be that is the chance to have bigger babies and better chances to survive, because the babies of the Lachesis are big enough, and probably that is the reason. But no one made an information about the nests, how in wild is the development of these eggs, because the wet area in where they are living is really wet. And my guess is where in this wet area these snakes are laying the eggs. So it's a very interesting mystery that I would like to follow and understand. But also, how is the ecological role of this animal in its habitat? How this snake is interacting. I also, in my project, put some camera traps, and it's just amazing how she is interacting with sloths. She's just smelling them and not biting. She's letting pass some tigrillos in front of her hole. she's letting pass some armadillos, and she's just in the way to be like, okay, that is there. But how she's biting, I had a little movie video where she's actually biting an agouti, and an agouti seems to be really big under the information that we were managing for many years, that apparently lachesis do not eat big price, big price. So that is something we had in books, but there is no doubt that we need to collect information from scratch about natural history of these species, and probably we are not having too much time for that. What if we do not start this study this year? Probably in 5 years, this species will be really under threatened. We don't know the population. We don't know the percentage of babies that reach an adult age to be able to reproduce. You know what I mean? So we need to work against time to understand and collect valuable data that can be combined with captive initiatives to make it possible conservation programs. So that is why I think that this project can be putting the lead in South America at the level of Western area to understand a little bit more. And why not, Chris, to be able to exchange information with other colleagues and be able to create, let's say, a regional plan, because probably in Colombia, it is not threatened yet, because, as I said before, the state of the forest is in better conditions than it is in Ecuador and Panama. And why not to establish the connections to do that? But to be able to understand and create a complete conservation project, we need to understand basic information on natural history first. Otherwise, we won't be able to manage this species at a conservation level, I guess.
Yeah. And so Bushmasters in general are thought to be, across all the species, are kind of thought to be really, thought of as kind of a primary forest, or like an untouched, if people will, forest animal. And, I've heard of some work in Central America that's showing that they're going into some of these more secondary forests. And it sounds like you're seeing or hearing of that in Ecuador as well. I mean, what are your thoughts on the Chocoan Bushmaster and kind of their link to kind of primary old growth rainforest versus younger forests, and the future of the species?
Okay. Well, you need to consider many aspects to answer that. First of all, the availability of food, Chris, due to some, that the weather in South America receives an important impact of the El Nino current, giving a lot of rain in some part of the year, which is October to May. These are the rainy season. However, when the El Nino is not coming, but La Nina is coming, we have the opposite. We have a too dry season that it's completely no rain at all. So that factor, that environmental factor, the fact of having rain or not rain, determines the amount of praise. In my view, if the forest is going to be dry, of course, the availability of food is not going to be enough, which is going to be the main pressure for the species to go and pass the boundaries of the primary forest to the secondary forest to find their food, of course. Secondly, most of people in the areas of influence of the reserves are having practices to put or change from a forest management into the cacao plantation or cattle. And cacao plantations, that the production of the seeds in the cacao are very sweet, and most part of the time is the food for rodents. And why not? The snakes are very smart to understand that they are going to find rodents, more availability of rodents in cacao plantations. And probably the impact, or what we are looking at, is that verrugosa in the following years, if the cacao plantations are going to still be there, they're going to transform their patterns of selection of habitat just because they are going to find easy food in the cacao plantations. However, for people, owners of the cacao plantations, it is not nice to have a bushmaster in the cacao plantations. And of course, they are going to kill every single specimen that they are going to see in the surroundings, just because an accident with a bushmaster, as you can understand, means a terrible impact in health. Plus, the isolation of that areas, it's like 6 hours driving from Quito to reach the reserve. If you suffer an accident of a bushmaster, you need to reach the closest hospital there is 2 hours driving. And also the access of antivenoms is the cost of that is very expensive for a local agriculture, for a person dedicated to agriculture. So all of the issues around antivenom, access to health services, these are the issues that are pushing to have and find out people prefer to kill the snakes rather than remove or translocate or whatever. So that is how I am working first. Before putting this project in place, I was working since 2021, reaching the community and involving and telling them and offering kind of help if there is an event of a snake bite, just to let them know that I am going to help to manage that situation if they don't kill the snakes. But I cannot manage the entire country. I'm just working in a little spot in the north part of Ecuador. So we need to spread this project in more areas in the country. We need to train in more biologists in what radio transmitter work means. We need to spread the educational outreach programs to all of the communities, not only the ones that I'm working with, So there are a lot of components and parts of this project, but at least I'm doing the first step. I'm not, I cannot cover many aspects.
Whether you're passionate about preserving biodiversity, ensuring the survival of threatened species, or simply want to contribute to a healthier planet, there's a role for you. Your support isn't just a contribution, it's an investment in a future where our ecosystems thrive. Go to www.orian.org to donate or become a member today. Yeah, that primary forest question's always been an interesting one for me. And it makes a lot of sense what you're saying, that some of these secondary forests or agricultural areas actually might provide more food for bushmasters. They also might provide more opportunity for the bushmasters to get killed, say, by farmers. But I also wonder, I just wonder why they are, like, what might make them more of a primary forest type animal. And I wonder, earlier you were talking about, where they lay the eggs, for example, and you're thinking of it kind of in a deep, dark, wet place. I'm wondering if they're limited by other things that keep them still kind of primary forest. But I'm just thinking out loud. But let's, before we begin to wrap up here, why don't you talk a little bit? You've been talking about the project, and you have this, you've been studying this one animal, and you've been working with the communities. And but why don't you talk about where the project's going? What are some of the next steps, and how you see the project kind of evolving over the next handful of years, and then what people, anybody in the audience who might be interested, what they could potentially do to help.
Okay, the following steps are to follow at least 10 different specimens in order to understand if the movement in the forest depends on captive animals, is similar in wild animals, yes, no. All of them prefer to sleep in primary forest and go to hunt to secondary forest, yes, no. Imagine that some of the patches of primary forest have like gaps in between of secondary forest. And in some situations, the snakes need to pass from one area to another. Let's say we know that this is a very territorial snake. It's very big. And I guess that during mating season, males can find a female far away. So the movement, the use of the forest, we need to understand a little bit more. We don't know, we know a little about this to assume and have conclusions. So that are the following steps in terms of following animals. However, Chris, I think, and I am really conscious of the fact that I am a biologist, I am a herpetologist working 30 years in this area, but probably I am going for short-term stages to the reserve, or let's say that I moved there for a year, but I am not a local person living there. And this is something we need to consider when we talk about conservation projects of venomous snakes. I know that we need, as professionals working with snakes, to create the local capacity to deal with these snake bite things as a prevention. Second, when you put those people, you give the chance to these people, the community people, to understand a little bit more about snakes, that they don't follow you to bite. They are normal animals like anyone. They are just hiding in a hole. They don't attack humans just because they like to attack, because that is the local discourse. When you give the opportunity to local people to understand a little bit more about snakes, they fall in love about snakes. And my dream and what I'm doing is all of the staff working at the reserve. I like to mention this. The reserve, there is a private reserve having like 20, 25 people working in their reserve in different other projects. But I train all of them to manage basic things, basic tools to manage snakes. And they know now, they feel completely comfortable knowing that this morning they found a snake in some trail and that's it. This is not the panic that it was in the past. There is a lot more confidence. And I am really, really confident that that is the hope for this area, for the snake, for the community, to have this community have an interest in saving the snake, and understand that people from Ecuador and overseas is interested to go and see the snake, and how community can benefit economically from those visitors, and they can still be living in those remote areas, getting access to the minimum things that a human being needs, which is access to food, a good house, education for children. But that can be developed after we preserve the Bushmaster in the Choco, because that is going to catch the attention of many people interested to support, donate, visit. They can develop their own way of ecotourism thing, not because of me, because of them. I can be there or not, and the Verrugosa need to be living there. You know what I mean? So that is my following steps in this project, to create that area open for visitors to see snakes in their natural habitat, but not having a risk. And if something happened, at least you have a protocol in place to put or apply in order to uh, to have a response if that could happen. So in my view, places like Ecuador, where we have a lot of biodiversity to explode, need to be done in a way that communities receive direct benefit. Otherwise, no conservation is possible. Remember that conservation in Latin countries, I'm talking about Latin countries, is in close relationship of socio-economical situations. Socioeconomical situations oblige people to hunt animals to eat. Socioeconomical situations oblige people to cut down a forest and transform into a pasture. Socioeconomical aspects oblige a family to kill a bushmaster in the garden because they don't have access to health services and antivenom. You know what I mean? So So the conservation of these animals, in my view, cannot be focused on the biological point of view of the Bushmaster. Need to be focused on how to improve the conditions of living of the community there after or because of the existence of the Bushmaster. That is how I understand now conservation need to be done in these areas. And we will see in the following years if that
that's good.
trend is correct.
Yeah, no, I love it. So doing a good thing there. Well, we are getting on. We've been talking for about an hour, so we'll begin to kind of wrap things up. But before we say goodbye, I'd like to have all of my guests tell me their best snake story. So do you have a snake story for us, María Elena?
Yes, the best snake story. In one of my visits to indigenous communities, my first commitment with the community is avoid asking me or calling me doctor, because I am not a doctor, first of all, and second, I am also someone that goes to the communities to learn. That is part of my speech with them. I'm learning from you as well as you are learning from me. Doing that, I kind of cut some barriers, because people is just very tired of looking experts and what is that for, So after I gave my talk, and it was a complete morning full of children, elders, and men, basically men, because they were the more interest to receive my training session, because they were interested to avoid snake bites while they are doing their activities in the field for hunting or bringing wood to construct or build their houses and such. So I always said, please, this training session, it is not to train you guys to collect snakes for fun. If you are not experts, please do not. Just if you find a snake in your trail, just take with a stick and put, just to avoid somebody else coming. Just prevention. But always my discourse is avoid handling, avoid manipulating animals, because if it's not necessary, okay? I finished my talk. Everybody invited me to the dinner, the lunchtime. I spent the night in the community. And guess what I received the day after I was in the community? A guy went to his house, and in the way going to his house, he found a coral snake. And he, following my training session, took one of his socks, put the true coral into the sock, made a tight, and bring me as a gift the day after, saying to me, look, you training myself very well, so that is my gift to you. Be careful, that is a coral inside my sock. That was hilarious.
That's funny.
That was hilarious, because that was a way to show me they can be trained to manage venomous snakes, yes. And as soon as they get confidence, they learn. They learn the same that we learn: respect for these animals. Don't kill them.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's great. Well, I will put some links in the show notes to the vivarium, and so people can find you on there. And I'd encourage everybody to check out the work María Elena's doing in more depth, and get involved in one way or another. And I just wanted to thank you so much for being on the podcast. I had a good time.
Thank you, Chris. I'm very honored to be in this amazing podcast that you always do. So thank you for having me the chance to tell about what we are doing in South America, in this tiny country called Ecuador, the world of the four worlds. Thank you so much.
Pleasure is all mine. And I just wanted to thank the audience and tell everybody to remember, snakes are animals too. and it's a privilege to see one in the wild.